Now spans 4 popes in 20 years. An award-winning journalist and MSNBC contributor Mike Barnicle joined us for our coverage of the death of Pope Francis last month, and to whom I can now attribute the quote, "This is huge." Barnicle, explain.
Well, I think it's bigger than huge. You know, Nicole, I think this was an epic day for the Catholic Church and the world, a world on fire. A world filled with wars, racial tensions, global warming, all the problems that we recite each and every day in the news, and all the problems that people know that they live with. And this one man seems to encompass everything that you'd want as a Catholic and as a citizen of the world in the papacy. He didn't, I think, he didn't choose Pope the 14th, Pope Leo XIV, by accident. I think it was based on Pope Leo XIII. And Pope Leo XIII, when you went to parochial school as a kid, as I did, one of the elements that they would teach you is to pay attention and read parts of and understand the encyclical that Pope Leo XIII wrote and distributed back in just at the turn of the century, the 1890s. It's called Rerum Novarum. And it's basically about the working poor in the world, people of lesser means, people who have been made fun of, people who are segregated, ordinary people. And that Rerum Novarum, I think, played an impact role on Pope Leo XIV. And I think he will speak to those things as Pope, and I think he will be a loud voice, a voice of sanity, a voice of peace, a voice of charity. Especially, he remembered Francis in his speech today. Pay attention. Don't let the voice of Francis leave your ear. He basically said that. And I think it's a great day for the Catholic Church, but a bigger day for the globe, a bigger day for all of us.
Mike Barnicle, not to be an American in this, but to be an American for a second, how did an American become the next Pope?
I think, you know, the oddity is, and it's probably sacrilegious to even allude to this, he's from Chicago. And his patron, Pope Francis, rigged the jury. He appointed more cardinals than any other pope had ever appointed. And I think going in, I think the tilt was toward not just necessarily this man, but it was sort of inclined toward a progressive, toward someone more modern than the other people who were mentioned as potential popes. And this man from Chicago left Chicago, I think, when he was 25 or 26 years of age, and became a global pastor, a global minister of the faith, in Peru especially, as we know. But he became familiar with all of the appointed cardinals in his post at the Vatican under Pope Francis. And that familiarity, I think, bred knowledge of who this man was. A gentle, intellectual, feeling person who knew poor people. And the root of the Catholic Church lies in forgiveness. It lies in taking care of people of lesser means. You know this by instinct if you grew up like I did in a fairly poor, middle-class New England mill town, largely Catholic, but largely a lot of immigrants, people who came from Germany, people who came from Russia, people who fled World War II before Hitler took over, or just as Hitler took over. And you understand what it means to be different in our culture and to be respected in our culture. And you understand one thing quickly, I think, that this particular Pope will understand immediately, given his roots. It's not how much money you have as a human being, it's the absence of money. And the absence of money can somehow segregate you from ordinary life. And this Pope is going to speak to things like that.
Mike, this Pope has already spoken to specific things that the current American president and vice president are for at a policy level, their harsh deportation policies. What do you anticipate as his level of sort of ongoing engagement around what is an increasingly brutal and harsh immigration policy from the current president of this country?
Yeah, I think this Pope's roots lie in speaking out, noticing, and making people notice inequity around them. The inequity of politics, the inequity of picking on people who have no comeback, have no roots of legitimacy in terms of finding lawyers or having enough access to money to represent them. People like immigrants who are here not by choice, most of them. They fled fear. They fled where they lived. They fled Central America, where they were in danger. They fled places like Venezuela, run by a dictator. They fled in fear of their lives. They fled to America because America is a magnet for people who know that America means freedom, freedom of thought, freedom of expression, freedom to make a living. That's what this Pope is going to speak about, I would hope, and I think that's going to happen.
Chris Jansing, you are more expert than I will ever be, and as I sat down, you already know about his sort of disposition toward interviews. You said he's a little shy and hasn't done a lot of them.
He hasn't done a lot of interviews, and I think that helped him, actually, Nicole. I think because he has laid low. He does not look for the limelight. This is someone who, as Mike said, he went to Peru and spoke out, by the way, recently about the 1.5 million Venezuelan migrants in Peru, supporting them, living that life, taking a vow of obedience, and went where he was asked to go. He also, it's revolutionary in so many ways when I think about the totality of who he was. He was brought up like Mike was, like I was, in a neighborhood Catholic church. You know, his dad was an educator. His mom, somebody who knows them, said she basically ran the church. We all know a lot of women who basically ran the church. But he is also someone who didn't go out there and say, vote for me. He went out there and did the work. So when he was in charge of appointing bishops, by nature, he made a lot of relationships. It doesn't hurt when you speak 5 languages and you read 2 more, right? But I also think, to the point of the American Catholic Church, and I completely agree that this is revolutionary for the worldwide church, for the global church, I think about those migrants who have been made to feel less than, the people who have worked with them, including in the Catholic Church, helping to settle migrants in this country. I think about the poor who have been denied. I think about the people I met at the Out Ministry, which caters to LGBTQ and works to more inclusion. What it meant to them when Pope Francis said, "Who am I to judge?" in the first months of his ministry. And the fear that they had that a new pope would not be someone who included them. The women who have risen to jobs in the Catholic Church that never existed for women before, who thought they might go away. And I want to tell you about one interview he did give a couple of years ago, because I think it's instructive. He said, "We are often preoccupied with teaching doctrine, but we risk forgetting that our first task is to teach what it means to know Jesus Christ." That may not sound so crazy, but it is indeed extraordinary in the context of the Catholic Church and the people who didn't like what they saw that Pope Francis was doing because they thought that he was doctrinally weak, that he was accepting and saying we can bless LGBTQ couples. When he said, if you are divorced, you can take communion. To say those things and then to say that we are too preoccupied sometimes with doctrine and not what Jesus Christ taught us is, I think, for a lot of people, breathing a tremendous sigh of relief right now that this is a man who will follow in that way in what we saw from Pope Francis.
In America, he's not a nationalist. In fact, when he was rebuking J.D. Vance, he was rebuking the idea that Vance put forward, which is that in the Christian faith, you love yourself first, your family next, your community after that, and then everybody else. And the rebuke from Pope Leo XIV before he became Pope was no. Jesus did not say that there's an order to your love. Yes. This is a man who has been global, as America in this moment is becoming much more insular.
Yes, as Jesus said, who is my neighbor? That was the attitude. There is no hierarchy of love. And I think, again, not to put be too kind of obvious about it, but he is a kind of contrast to Trump himself and the Trump administration in the things that he cares about. He's compassionate. He's compassionate for the poor. You treat the immigrant like you treat your own family. That's very, very different than what we're seeing in the White House.
We're also just getting word that Donald Trump and President Zelensky are speaking by phone. This is according to President Zelensky's spokesperson. We don't have any details. They say they'll provide some details. This, of course, is as this administration is trying to find some sort of way out of the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, but Russia doesn't seem to have any desire to stop fighting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of rule of law, which is the rule of war, rather, that the country that is gaining territory doesn't want to negotiate, and the country that's losing territory does want to negotiate. Putin is in a advantageous position for himself now. He's manipulating Donald Trump. Zelensky is trying to get back in Trump's good graces. And Trump, you know, to his credit, doesn't like to see the bombing of civilians in Ukraine. He doesn't like to see that kind of devastation. And, you know, maybe Zelensky will have some purchase on this now.
We will see. We'll wait for that readout. Rick Singal, really good to have you. Governor Kasich, thank you so much for watching on and off. I hope that when it was off, it was only because you needed to take a bathroom break or something, and you came right back and you kept on watching. But
well, you guys have done. Listen, you've done a great job. Just remember this about this man. He's a man of God. So he looks at every human being equally. No one's more important than anybody else. And for those that are down and out, those who are downtrodden, those who live in the shadows, he believes they ought to be lifted. And I think that is a wonderful message worldwide and, of course, here in the United States of America. Thanks,
and Governor,
ladies.
Wasn't it amazing when Chris yelled out, "It's an American"?
Did I yell?
You did.
Oh.
You exclaimed.
It was so exciting. And she'll tell you, the last time I was on here, she said she found out my nickname was Pope. So I feel a real connection to this guy.
Well, you are neighboring with Illinois. I'll give you that. Governor Kasich, thank you so much. Chris Jensen, thank you for sticking around with me. You know I'm not a Catholic. I appreciate you being here.
Much more to say here, except this Pope, not a big fan of Trump and Vance. There are some indications that he's a little bit more moderate, a little bit more conservative than Pope Francis on certain issues such as the role of women in the church, LGBTQ issues. All of that aside, what's clear is that he's more progressive, clearly so, than Trump and Vance. And relative to the Catholic Church, even on those issues, he probably leans in a progressive direction. But where it really shines is in his approach to migration, to the rights of the less fortunate, to economic inequality. And there, he's been an outspoken adversary of everything Donald Trump. And you've seen it. This man was a cardinal, a very powerful man in the Catholic Church. His Twitter account was a public space, a press conference, if you will, where he, as a very important man in the Catholic Church, even before he was Pope, could air his opinions. And what he clearly said, among other things, is that Trump's approach on things like capital punishment, wrong. Trump's approach on things like migration, wrong. J.D. Vance and Trump basically saying, you can't love humans outside the United States the same as you love Americans. You have to love, people that look like you and live close to you more than humanity as a whole. Wrong. This Pope, in his earliest days, because all of this came out today, has made it clear that while, yes, you have your first American Pope, you also have an anti-Trump Pope.